This is the Sports Source, presented by Junk Be Gone and Renewal by Anderson. Now, your host, John Pennington.
Good Sunday morning. Welcome into the Sports Source, presented today by Junk Be Gone. We have a full show. We have a bigger crowd in-house than I even anticipated today. We have a full house. We have a lot of topics, football, basketball, recruiting, you name it, some faces you haven't seen in a while. Right back with us. Let's jump on today's show. Let's just get right into it. First segment brought to you by Junk Be Gone. And you guys know that I am a believer in this company. Well, this week I had to put down a 15-year-old pet. And just awful. And anybody who's ever done that knows that your house is now filled with blankets and toys, and if it's a cat, you got those towers and that kind of stuff. Well, that's kind of sad to have that around the house, those memories, those reminders. Well, there's a solution. In a couple of days, I'm going to have Junk Be Gone over at my house, and it goes all out, and that helps me mentally. Whatever you need is what I'm trying to show. Whatever you need, Junk Be Gone can help you out. I love them. They're a great local company with tremendous family ownership. Junk Be Gone, give them a shout. Whatever your need, I will be doing so this week. All right, want to welcome in round one of our panel today. We have right here Chuck Cavaleris, a surprise guest today. Right there, we have Jimmy Himes. Down there, David Ubben. And over there, we have Mr. Mike Strange. All right, thanks to everyone. We got a couple more guys coming out here a little bit later, so if you don't like these guys, we got more on the way. This week, Athlon Sports ranked the Tennessee job as the 16th best college football head coaching job in America. Let's take a look at their list. And here you see the top 16, and the SEC teams are in the kind of darker, barely darker font color there. Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, Texas, Florida, USC, Clemson, Oklahoma, and then Florida State, LSU, Michigan, Texas A&M, Notre Dame, Penn State, Auburn, all better than the Tennessee job. Tennessee 7th in the SEC on this list. Gentlemen, is that a fair assessment? 16 overall, 7 in the SEC. Is that where you think the Tennessee job ranks?
I think it's pretty close. The one I've debated with in my mind for years is the Auburn job, Tennessee-Auburn. I've kind of flip-flopped that. I think when A&M came in the league, I do think it's a better job. The fan base you've got, the facilities, the money behind the program. I'd put A&M over it. So I don't have a problem with that list. I think it's about right. But the one I debate a little bit is Auburn.
I think the big thing is, every coach knows that it's all about the talent. The good coaches at least know that. And I think you look at that list and you can see that just about every one of those, it's just protect your state borders. And in Tennessee, that's always been the most difficult part of the Tennessee job, is if you're going to win big here, you got to go to Georgia, you got to go to Florida, you got to go to South Carolina, you got to go to all your surrounding states. You got to do well in Tennessee, but you can't build a top program just out of Tennessee talent. And that's difficult, especially now when a lot of those people around you are doing really well, and you got to convince a kid from South Carolina to say no to Clemson and come to Tennessee. That's a tough ask. And so I think that's what separates Tennessee.
Which wasn't a tough ask in 1998 when Tennessee was building a national championship team with kids from South Carolina and Georgia.
Well, to that point, Tennessee's losing some of the best in-state players to out-of-state programs, too.
The players inside this state are actually better now than they were 20 years ago.
That's exactly right.
But the thing that's going to change, though, is a lot of those kids have moved here, so they don't have that Tennessee tie yet. Mm-hmm. A generation from now, when you've had kids that have grown up in this state, if Tennessee's worth a flip, maybe they'll have a little bit more homegrown talent coming their way. Mike, do you agree with this ranking or not?
Yeah, I'm with Jimmy. I think depending on what decade, you could flip Tennessee-Auburn, but 15 years ago it would have been higher up the list, obviously. But for right now, I think that's there's probably some programs out there that would argue they're better than Tennessee that aren't on that list.
That's what I was going to say. You're borderline top 15. Right?
Yeah.
I don't know if you're borderline top 20 now to the way things are. And I would be surprised. I would think Alabama's the number one as long as Nick Saban's there.
They've got Auburn in state, whereas Georgia has to fend off all these other teams coming in there, but Georgia Tech and Georgia State, easier than tackling Auburn. Or, heck, UAB went 10 games last year, but Alabama's not going to lose anybody to UAB. Mm-hmm. I think it's a little too much on the recency bias, personally. If you'd done this list 20 years ago, 1999, is Tennessee's 7th best job in the SEC? I don't think it's anywhere near that. I think what it doesn't, what this fails to take into account is if one school hires Nick Saban and another school hires Lane Kiffin and Derek Dooley and Butch Jones.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, if If in 2005 Mike Hamilton had said, you know what, Philip Fulmer had one loss, and he found out Nick Saban wanted to leave LSU, and Saban comes here, and Bama goes through a list of Kiffin, Dooley, Jones.
Dubose.
Does anybody think? Yeah. Does anybody think Tennessee is that much farther behind Alabama? I think there's just recency bias here. I don't think it takes into account. You're looking at just recent wins. Well, that's true, but good coaches get wins wherever they go. So, I mean, I didn't think James Franklin going to Vanderbilt, nobody thought he'd do what he did. You guys can disagree? It
No, I
seems
think
that you're
so.
looking at me like I'm crazy.
I think honestly, I think the Alabama job is overvalued. I mean, they have a lot of support and expectations, but under the wrong coach, those expectations are a little bit of an albatross around your neck. They make the job more difficult.
Yeah, but they keep getting the right coach.
Yeah.
Well, that's true.
Bear Bryant.
Well, now they do.
They've had three right ones.
Yeah, but I think
so-
that's the thing is you look at I'm of the mind that
DeBoer's
Georgia is the best job in college football. I don't think that is going to change for a long time, regardless of what they do, because of the talent, because of the resources. But I think if you're looking at that list, Alabama is definitely overvalued to me.
I don't. I think Alabama's the number one.
I do too.
I think
Yeah,
Florida
I-
is overvalued.
Talent.
I don't think Florida's overvalued.
Oh, I do. Florida's had 4 win seasons. If you take Urban Meyer out of it, they've been just as up and down as Tennessee
But
in
Steve
recent years.
Spurrier. Well, you said recent years.
Right. I mean,
it depends on how far do you want to go back. I mean, if
Well,
you want to go
I'm
back
just saying-
way back.
Yeah, right. They didn't have anything until the advent of air conditioning in the 60s.
Well,
really.
no, they actually, I guess they won a title in 84, 85 that was stripped from them.
That's right.
But again, it depends on how far you want to go back. Are you going to go back to when Tennessee hired Neyland? Or are you going to look at the last 20 years, last 10 years?
Yeah, I
think it fluctuates based on where you are.
I think it would be interesting
Where
to
your
take
program
that
is.
list and look at the all-time wins. You know, Michigan is going to have a case for
In
something.
Tennessee's top 10 job.
Well,
Or
yeah.
top
Well, I
12
mean,
now,
yeah.
depending on how far
And that
they
may be
go.
why you're hanging. You're still where you are in those rankings.
I was at the College Football Hall of Fame this week looking around, and they had a decade by decade, the top 10 programs in each decade. And if we go back 50 years to say 1969 forward, only one decade, the 1990s, was Tennessee a top 10 program. So that's
Jimmy's done that before. I know you've
Yeah.
done
I did
that.
it in the SEC
Yeah.
and only go
Yeah.
ahead.
No, I was just going to say, the problem I always had with that was, but if you look at it 65-75 and 75-85, instead of starting with the zeros, you start at the fives, then that's completely changed. Tennessee has much better between the fives than it is between the zeros, for example.
Yeah, but also if you do the fives, then there are some years where they're like 8th in the league instead of 5th. So that depends on the numbers too. But I did it by decade. Yeah. If you started from the 1960s going forward, Tennessee never finished better than 5th in the SEC except the 90s. That was the only year. Now, I say 5th because back then there were 10 teams.
Yeah.
Now you got 14, so that changes the parameters a little bit too.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about Florida for a second, because I've long thought everybody acts, oh, Florida, and they forget that. Take Meyer out of the equation. What has Florida done?
Pre-Spurrier, too.
And here's the thing: on that list, Florida was number 5. Florida State was number 9. Wait a second. You'd rather be in the SEC? That's a better job than being in the ACC,
I don't know
where
about
basically
that.
you play Clemson? No, I don't agree with that. I would argue Florida State's a better job than Florida.
Well, you can make a strong
close.
case for that.
Yeah, it's
I mean,
close.
you could.
I think
Jimmy
Florida has
Right.
so much. Yeah, go ahead. Florida has so much talent, but I think when you're competing as much as Florida is, that makes things difficult.
But that gets back to the Georgia factor. You've got very few schools that are worth a flip down there. In Florida now, you got 8 schools
exactly.
playing
You
D1
do.
football, and most of them are going to bowl games now.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that Florida gig is tougher than fifth best in the country. Go ahead, you disagree.
No, I think Florida is one of the 3 best jobs in the SEC with Alabama and Georgia. And I think that being a state school, and again, I look more at what you've done more recently than I do before 1985 or before Spurrier, as to where does your program rate. I mean, if we're going to go back that far, heck, Minnesota was a heck of a job back in the 60s and 50s.
Yeah.
So was Ole Miss.
Great in the 30s.
But they're not. So, but again, I think it's more based on what you've done in somewhat recent times. I don't know how far you want to go back. My definition
Oh, I'm not
of
going back to the 20s. I'm just
No, I'm not either.
I'm just thinking there's a little bit of recency
Well, Tennessee
bias.
would want you to go back to the 50s.
But even as bad as Muschamp was during his tenure, you had an 11-win season. Dubose won an SEC championship as bad as he was at Alabama. So
Well, Butch Jones had 2 9-win seasons here.
he never won an SEC
Top
East,
25.
though. Yeah.
That's true. I think that this overlooks the fact that the right coach can make a job look a lot better than it is, or the wrong coach can make a good job look bad.
Exactly.
And
I agree with
'cause
that.
I think if you're looking at potential, and we're so many of these schools, and we're talking Texas A&M versus Tennessee. When Tennessee's rolling, I don't know. I'm not saying, oh no, Texas A&M's clearly here. I think Tennessee is still in terms of potential, the only issue you've got, in my view, is the recruiting base, and that's improving.
Well,
And you've shown in years past, if certain teams aren't up, you can go raid those areas. I don't think Tennessee is if you're looking at it right now, okay, 7. If you're looking at it and saying big picture, I think there's potential there. I think Tennessee has dropped more because of who their coach is or who their coaches have been rather than the job has certainly suddenly turned into a bad gig.
Yeah, I think the whole discussion that we're having, I think we're focusing too much on field results when you talk about the quality of the job, because some of that is out of your control. If you hire a coach you think is good, it ends up not being good. I think when you talk about the quality of the job, it boils down to two things. Do you have the money to do things? And at Tennessee, they have
Has.
two. Well, sure, has, whatever.
Has. Moving
Yeah, but you have two.
Haslam.
Yeah.
Moving forward,
But you have
though.
$2 million coordinators and nobody bats an eye. Do you have the money? And then can you bring talent onto your campus? And I think that's where Tennessee has difficulties. And so, we'll see. But I think when you're talking about the quality of job, it comes down to those two things.
and the other thing, real quick, how many of those other really good jobs, those teams, do you play? You're also that
that's
figures
true.
into it too.
Yeah, but that's how you get money, though. in
7
the
of the
SEC.
15 are in this conference.
But that's why the SEC's TV rights are so valuable, is because you get to see Georgia and Alabama.
I think you're right, though. A lot of it comes down to money because that ties back to facilities and everything else. And I think it's going to be interesting to see where Tennessee's big dollar donor is going to be 10, 15, 20 years from now. I mean,
Or 5.
or 5. The Sun is now in Cleveland with his own pro sports franchises. You got 2 now. And the Haslams took a lot of heat during the Schiano mess.
Yeah.
People acted like you're the ones that have destroyed this program, when in fact they're the ones that have bankrolled the program. If they ever decided to take their money and leave, I think Tennessee would be in an interesting position in terms of facilities and everything else. But anyway, when we come back, the SEC has done something that I've been calling for years. Years. They finally listened. We'll tell you what that is when we talk the new bowl tie-ins next. Come on back.
McLean's Painting, Knoxville's #1 painters since 1999. We turn your dream home into your reality. Visit McLeansPainting.com or call 769-8134 to set up your free estimate.